Chapter 1. Baashika. Not of wars, not of tears, but of Pan would he chant, and of the Netherds he sweetly sang. Theocritus. I was to stay with friends in Mosul, and it was my host, Captain C, who had taken infinite trouble in arranging for me, with permission of the authorities, lodging in the Yazidi village that I had chosen as my headquarters. The road thither is impassable in wet weather, and I felt apprehensive when Captain C showed me pockmarks more than an inch deep in his flower beds, and plants battered to the ground by hail, which had fallen the day before. I was still more anxious when the sky darkened as if Sinbad's rock were approaching. Sure enough, rain followed, heavy and sharp, but the seas comforted me. A sun next morning and a good wind would dry the road at this time of the year, they assured me. And so it was. I woke to a blue, rain-washed day. Whilst I paid calls upon the governor and mayor, the roads were drying in the bright sun and fresh wind, so that all was well for our start. A kindly thought had led the local officials to allot me, a Yazidi policeman, as guardian and guide, an honest-looking lad who spoke Kurdish as well as Arabic, and therefore could act as interpreter when the latter language failed. As a guardian, he was unnecessary, but he proved to be a pleasant companion. He and his baggage were stowed into our taxi, and off we went. The road to Baashika is only so called by tradition. It is really an unmade track through the cornfields. Do they mean cornfields or grain? The sheaves of wheat or barley or whatever. And it was still extremely soft and muddy. At times the car waltzed disconcertingly, and here and there the driver forged through the corn in order to avoid a bog. At the worst places we got out and walked, and that was enjoyable, for though our shoes became clogged with mud as we walked through the corn and bean fields. Well, it was a time that they would have brought corn over, but corn requires to be dry at a certain time in its development. The larks were singing rapturously. The hills and snow mountains grew nearer, mile by mile, and the wildflowers grew amidst the blades. I was glad to find out that Jadon, our policeman, being hill-bred, knew the names of the flowers, sometimes in Arabic and sometimes in Kurdish. He never ceased to be amused by my passion for knowing the names of flowers, trees, and herbs. What did it matter? And indeed, what does it matter? However, I liked, for instance, to be able to name the small and extravagantly sweet yellow clover that grew everywhere. No-fill, and to learn the familiar words by which field plants and herbs are known to the countryman. Perhaps in the Garden of Eden, while Adam was naming the animals, Eve named the flowers. Mark Twain's Diary of Adam and Eve, and I think there's actually a couple names for that stuff, but yeah, tries to speculate that gender thing, but I had visited Baashika before. It lies at the very foot of the hills of the Jebel Hambarin Range, and the whitewashed cones of Yazidi shrines rise above the olive groves with which it is surrounded. We passed by these groves and then by a very new and imposing church, not at all unsightly, but I discovered not loved by the Jacobite Christians of the village. The Pope built it for the Latins with Italian money, they say, whilst we paid for our church ourselves. Perhaps I should not call them Jacobites, for they prefer to be called Syrian Orthodox Christians. They have nothing to do with the Pope, and the Pope nothing to do with them. and they look upon their ancient Oriental communion as superior to that of the Latins. The Uniate churches are moneyed and subsidized. The communities of the non-Uniates are poor, but proudly independent. Yeah, it's more important that you actually believe and are active in the faith rather than being a rich community with elaborate libraries and buildings and all that. Of that latter, we were immediately concerned with arrival and settling into the tiny house which had been allotted to me. The house was clean, swept, and garnished. 2 bedsteads, a table, 2 benches, and 4 chairs had been provided for us. It was all that we needed, indeed more, as I had already a camp bed and such pots, pans, and household gear as were necessary. I had asked A to come and spend a few days with me if she could, and had warned her that if she came, she must bring her own bed and mug and plate. The house consisted of a tiny kitchen, a room on the ground level, a living room, and a small room off it, both 2 steps up from the grass-grown courtyard. Steps led to a flat roof, halfway up being the usual Oriental latrine. A hole in the floor, a dry basement, was assigned to my servant, Mikhail. The little room off the living room reserved for A, should he come, and Jadon elected to sleep on the floor, so that we were all comfortable and happy. I had just lunched, unpacked, and gone to salute the mayor of the village, who was sitting comfortably on a bench in front of the police post, when there was an arrival. Captain C, piling thoughtfulness on thoughtfulness, had arrived with a rug, some curtains, and 1 or 2 other details which he thought might add to our comfort. He had no time to stay. He just bestowed his benefits and made off again on the muddy road to Mosul. The first thing to do was to get into touch with the Yazidis themselves, so I got out a letter which Mirawansa had written for me to her friend Rashid, the son of Sadak, and went in search of him. The main village street had a deep ditch running down its center to carry off winter torrents, but though this was empty, it was not used as a rubbish dump. John walked modestly a pace or 2 behind me, and though we conversed all the way, the dialogue was over my left shoulder. The house of Sadak stood at the farthest end of Baashika, and as he is a man of some substance, it was one of the larger houses of the place. A stone archway, in the shadow of which were seats, admitted us to a large courtyard full of fruit trees, down which a clear stream ran in a paved bed. On 2 sides of the courtyard were living rooms, those on one side being shaded by a pergola of vines. Outside these, an aged lady, wearing the Kurdish turban, was engaged in some household task. She spoke nothing but Kurdish, but Jadon explained as she came forward hospitably to meet us and place chairs for us in the shade, while someone went to find her son. Her husband, Sadak, she told us, had gone to his estate in the Jebel Sinjar, but hoped to be back for the spring feast. Even as she was speaking, Rashid, her son, arrived. He was a young and good-looking man with a face full of energy and intelligence, for whom one immediately conceived liking and respect. I handed him Mirawansa's letter, which he frankly admitted that he could not read. There is no shame here in admitting illiteracy. Reading and writing are priestly accomplishments, just as among the tribes. Until recently, such soft and clerkly arts were despised by the sheikhs, each of whom kept a private scribe. Amongst the Yazidis, as already said, school education was until lately forbidden by religion. Rashid, however, is having his own children educated, and has a brother who is a schoolmaster in Jebel Sinjar. He told me laughingly that the learning of his brother was so much esteemed that his opinion was asked about everything. He is not only a schoolmaster, but a doctor. a lawyer and a judge, and they even ask him to write charms for them. And, well, having some among them who knew the arts of charms and astrology and, in the more commonly thought of way, that wasn't for everyone. But yeah, that theirs is a religion that, is not flexible to the principles in your old-fashioned ways, that there's consciousness and principles per se, is that, but they're allowed to do what works for them as long as they, do, they're supposed to, again, be in line with these entities, whether or not it's according to one material form or not of action. Yeah, I didn't articulate that too well, but he busied himself about making tea for me, kindling wood in a brazier and boiling a kettle in the capricious shade of the freshly leaving vines, then pouring the clear brown tea into wasted Persian glasses called istikons. And I'm sure that S at the end is I'm not sure about Persian, but yeah, I don't think that's the right plural. But meanwhile, Jadon read him the letter, after which I tried to explain to him why I had come. I wanted to see the spring festival and ask his advice as to the better place to be in for the feast days. Baashika or Sheikh Ada. Sheikh Ada is the Mecca of the Yazidis, the great shrine to which all travel at least once in a lifetime, and at every feast of assembly if they can. The Feast of Assembly, sometimes called the Great Feast, takes place annually in the early autumn, but the spring feast, Sarasal or Salah, falls on the first Wednesday of Nisan in the Eastern calendar, which coincided this year with the middle of the Occidental April. And Sheikh Adi, of course, kind of like Ezra, it can be said that Ezra, in the Jewish tradition, predate, the one that compiled the, had things gathered to compile the Tonic. It could be said that he wasn't Jewish in the sense that we would think of rabbinic Judaism or whatever, although they did have their Cohens and rabbis. But Sheikh Adi, too, if he was composing what was available in the area of the tradition, it doesn't necessarily mean he was of that tradition in the sense that people want him to be. Rashid considered, your presence has been Sheikh Adi, he said, and so knows that at Sheikh Adi there is the shrine and the valley, but no village. They keep the feast there, it's true, but not as we keep it here. This feast is the feast of the people, and here there are plenty of people, and Yazidis and Kurds come in from all the hills and neighboring countries to see the feast and the Tawafel. Tawafi. And here is a much better thing than at Sheikh Adi. People even come from Mosul and Kirkuk to see the dancing. So they circle about, right? Lescott says that Baba Sheikh and Pesh Imam are one of the same, but there's not really the evidence. Okay. Jadon corroborated him. It is well known that the feast at Baashika is better than at any other place. Without committing myself to any decision as yet, I tried to tell him my other purpose, which was without inquisitiveness to learn something about his people and his religion. I feel sure, I said, that much of what others say about you is false, and I have learnt that only what I see with my own eyes and verify for myself is true. Rashid promised to help me, but as to religion, he said, I cannot assist you, as we laymen know little. It may be difficult for you. I will bring you to some of the cabals, but he broke off doubtfully. and then added, "No doubt when you get to Sheikh Ada, the Shawish will tell you much about our religion, for he talks Arabic as well as Kurdish and lives always at the shrine." Here, I should explain that the Yazidi priesthood is graded and subdivided. The religious chief, the pope of the cult, is Baba Sheikh, who lives at Sheikhan Ain Sifni. He is head of all the sheikhs, who constitute the highest order of priesthood. The sheikhs are supposedly lineal descendants of the companions of the sect founded by Sheikh Ada in the 12th century. Although these were so pure, says Yazidi legend, that they created their sons without the assistance of women. These miraculously begotten sons, however, took wives to themselves and founded families. The Sheikhly families are of a racial type markedly different from the Yazidi laymen, being darker and more Semitic in appearance. They exercise what are almost feudal rights over the laymen, each family being attached to a certain Sheikhly family. Only the Sheikhly class are instructed in the inner doctrines of the faith, and until lately, only the sheikhs, especially the family of Sheikh Hassan al-Basri, could read or write. The sheikhs officiate at marriages, at births, and at death, and it is often from a Sheikhly clan that every layman and laywoman chose the other brother and other sister whom he or she is bound to serve in this world and the next. Of this more in a later chapter. Moreover, a sheikh may not marry outside his caste, and the portion of a daughter who marries outside it is death. A subfunctionary to the Baba Sheikh is called the Pesh Imam. Below the sheikhs come the peers. A peer must also be present at religious ceremonies and acts to some degree as an understudy of the sheikh, as he may take his place if no sheikh is available. Like the sheikhs, they are credited with certain magic powers. The qawwals constitute the third religious rank. They are the chanters, as their name signifies, and the chants which they recite to music on all occasions are not written down, but words and music learnt in early youth are transmitted from father to son. They must be skilled in the use of the daf, a large tambour, and the shabab, a wooden pipe. Like sheikhs and peers, qawwals may not marry outside their caste, and they do not cut the hair or beard. Most of the qawwals live at Baashika or Bahsana, its sister village, and it is they who travel near and far with the images of the sacred peacock, in order to visit which the faithful pay money, so that they are usually men of the world, since their tours, until lately, included Russia, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. The next hereditary order is the fakirs, but, the mendicants. But of them I will speak when I come to my stay at Sheikh Ada. There are non-hereditary orders as well, the Kocheks, ascetics, who wear nothing but white, dedicate themselves to the service of the shrines, and are credited with seeing visions and prophetic gifts. And lastly, the nuns. The Fakriyat, who are vowed to celibacy, wear white and spend their lives in the service of the shrines at Sheikh Ada. As to the Shawish, of whom Rashid spoke, he has his permanent dwelling there, but not having seen or talked with him personally, I am not clear as to his functions and powers. Immediately helpful, Rashid at once sent in search of a qawwal who lived in the village. Meanwhile, I took up the tale of my wants. I hoped, I said, I learned something of Yazidi ways, how women lived and managed their households, brought up their children, and lived their daily life. I should like, I said, to talk to the village midwife, and to go to a wedding, should there be one. The midwife was easy, Rashid replied. He would send her to me, but perhaps I had heard that the coming month of Nisan was forbidden for marriage. The pity was that there had been 2 weddings in the village only last week. We cannot order such things, I said, laughing. Moreover, I have assisted once at a Yazidi wedding when I stayed with your mirror at Ba Idre. And we see sort of an implication that the Sufis operated sort of a reform movement upon the whole thing. You could say, or they took over the preservation, but so there's an outer order that's okay in the general public, or but you also see the schools of sorcerer, both sorcerers and Sufis. Well, sometimes it's the same thing, but typically not, right? They have their methods and they have their ways that they're in the ethnic group that they're in. Whether the society is Muslim or a mix of that and some other things, they fit into that. But they have their methods and they transmit their methods through that. But if you get to know them, there's like these secret teachings. And by the secret teachings in the Sufis, I'm not saying that they're not Muslim. I'm just saying that there's a tradition of their own experiences, and maybe there's traditions that's been passed down through them that it's not per se available elsewhere. And so there's the Yazidi thing is probably broad and still containing remnants of traditions going back even tens of thousands of years, but how to get access to that in a way to compose like a new Bible or something like that